Section 1. The Formative Years. Leonard before L.A., 2002-2012, before the streets knew him as L'A Capone. Before the YouTube views, the lyrics, the legacy there was simply Leonard. Leonard Anderson. A quiet boy with wide eyes and a crooked smile, born into a world that often asked more of its children than it gave. Leonard was born on September 18, 1996, in Chicago, Illinois. His mother, Dedra Morris, was a strong, focused woman who worked hard to provide, while his father was largely absent during the early years. He was raised primarily in Chicago's South Side, a part of the city infamous for its segregation, poverty, and gang violence, but also rich in culture, resilience, and history. In neighborhoods like these, boys became men quickly. Too quickly. From an early age, Leonard stood out not because he was loud or boastful, but because he was quiet, thoughtful, always observing, always listening. While other kids acted out or chased attention, Leonard was content with his own space. He liked cartoons, cereal, especially Cinnamon Toast Crunch, and playing with his cousins. He loved to draw. He was artistic. His mother remembered him as a boy who didn't like the streets, but got pulled into them anyway. Life took a turn when Leonard's father resurfaced around his middle school years. His father lived in Atlanta, and in a move that briefly offered a change of pace, Leonard went to live with him for a time. Atlanta was different. The sun was warmer, the culture more open. For a brief window, Leonard experienced a version of childhood that didn't involve constantly looking over your shoulder. But then, in 2009, tragedy struck again. His father passed away. Leonard, now 13, returned to Chicago. Whatever innocence he had left behind when he first left was long gone by the time he came back. The South Side had only gotten rougher. Gangs were more active. Murders were no longer shocking, they were expected. Leonard was no longer just a quiet boy. He was now a teenager with wounds, with history, with something to prove. At school, he wasn't a troublemaker, but he didn't fit the mold of a model student either. He had friends in all circles, but gravitated toward those who, like him, had grown up learning to wear a mask, cool on the outside, storm on the inside. By the time he was in his early teens, Leonard had started making music. It began as an outlet, something creative. It's just him and a pen. Would write bars in his notebook, freestyle with friends at school, and eventually start recording on cheap microphones and basement setups. But this was also the era of Chief Keef, Lil Durk, and the birth of drill music. For teens like Leonard, this wasn't just music. It was a movement. It was raw, honest, and violent, just like their lives. Drill wasn't about metaphors or radio hooks. It was about survival. It was storytelling by any means necessary. Around this time, Leonard became close with several young rappers who would soon shape the Chicago scene. He formed bonds with Clint Massey, Rondo Numbanine, C-Day, Tay 600. They were all part of the Black Disciples, a gang with deep roots on the South Side. Leonard aligned with the 600 set. It's named after a specific block and territory in Englewood. It wasn't just about repping numbers, it was about protection, its brotherhood, and identity. It was during these years that Leonard began to disappear, and L'A Capone was born. The name was a combination of his initials and a nod to infamous gangster Al Capone, who had ruled Chicago's underworld during the Prohibition era. The irony wasn't L'A Capone had made his name in the city nearly a century earlier. Leonard would try to carve his legacy on the same streets, through rap instead of racketeering. But the streets weren't just lyrics, they were real, and they were closing in. In September 2012, just a year before his death, Leonard was shot for the first time. The bullet entered through his hip, survived after surgery, but the incident left him shaken. Still, his resolve deepened. Rather than retreat from danger, he doubled down. His music became darker, more focused, more aggressive. Pain was no longer just an experienced, it was fuel. At just 16 years old, L'A Capone was entering a phase of rapid growth. He had charisma, he had bars, and he had credibility. The streets respected him. The music scene was beginning to notice. He was recording more, performing more, and appearing on tracks with bigger names. He had caught the attention of Lil Durk, who brought him further into the only the family OTF circle. It was a delicate balance, ambition versus affiliation. On one hand, L'A Capone wanted a way out. He wanted to make it, to put his mom in a house, to leave the war zones behind. On the other, he was tied to a lifestyle that made that dream almost impossible. In Chicago, rap didn't always open doors. Sometimes it put targets on your back. He knew this. Everyone around him knew this. But at 16, there's a kind of immortality you feel when the crowd knows your lyrics, when the cameras are on, when your name is buzzing. L'A Capone was flying higher than ever. He was on the brink of something. Major, he just didn't know that the clock was already ticking. Asterisk. Section 2. The Rise of a Drill Star. Music Momentum. And a voice from the Warzone late 2012. L'A Capone was no longer just another teen on the block. He was becoming a name. On street corners, in high school cafeterias, in basements, and barbershops, people were talking about him. In Chicago's burgeoning drill scene, that kind of buzz didn't come easy. You had to earn it with your presence, with your affiliations, and most of all, with your lyrics. The city's drill movement had been simmering for years, but it exploded into national consciousness around 2012. Thanks to artists like Chief Keef, whose single I Don't Like went viral and caught the attention of Kanye. West drill was unlike anything else in rap at the time. Harsh, grim, brutally honest. There was no sugarcoating. It was unfiltered street reporting, told in 16 bars or less, while Chief Keef and Lil Durk became the faces of the first wave. A second wave of drill rappers was forming behind them, and L'A Capone was one of its brightest stars. He had the street credibility, the lyrical prowess, and the visual presence to take his music beyond his block. Unlike many of his peers, he didn't just rap about violence, he rapped with a kind of eerie calm that made every bar feel surgical. There was something deliberate in the way he delivered his verses. Fast, cold, direct. It didn't sound like he was performing. Main platform for Chicago's drill scene. Tracks like Work and We Up introduced listeners to his voice, slightly nasal, always intense, always locked in. He didn't waste words. Every line cut through, and fans began to notice. Then came Murda, released in early 2013. It was raw and aggressive. It's the type of song that caught fire on the internet. It wasn't radio-friendly, and it didn't need to be. On the South Side, and in the online drill fan base that was growing nationally, L'A Capone had found an audience that didn't just listen, they related. They lived it too, but it was. Play for Keeps, released in July 2013. It changed everything. A collaboration with Rondo Numbanine, Play for Keeps became a street anthem almost overnight. The beat produced by Smiles was relentless echoing kicks and hi-hats over a foreboding synth loop. Rondo opened the track with energy and aggression, but when L'A came in for his verse, the entire tone shifted. He was icy, controlled. His delivery was so composed it was unnerving. "You don't really want that drama. I can get your whole block wet," he rapped, not like a threat, but like a statement of fact. The video, uploaded to YouTube, became one of the most viewed drill tracks of its time. It racked up millions of views, cementing L'A Capone's name alongside drill heavyweights. And unlike many others, his style didn't feel like imitation. It was uniquely his own. His lyrics were sharp, laced with references to street politics and real-world events. He name-dropped enemies and lost friends in the same breath. Like Shondale, How the Hot Shit Feel were not just lyrics, they were disses aimed at rival gangs. And every drill fan in Chicago knew what they meant. The line referred to Shondale Tuka Gregory, a murdered member of the GDO-affiliated STL-EBT set. To outsiders, it was a bar. To those in the streets, it was blood-stained poetry. But it wasn't all bravado. Beneath the threats and flexes, there was vulnerability hidden in the cadence, the flow, the pain in his voice. You could hear that he had been through things. These weren't just rhymes. They were records of real fear, real loss, and real survival. In just a few months, L'A Capone dropped multiple standout tracks. So Loud, a solo track that highlighted his confidence and command of the mic. Shooters featuring fellow 600 rapper Eddie, where both artists traded verses about loyalty and retaliation. Round here, a gritty portrayal of what it meant to walk through his neighborhood without protection. Each track added to his reputation. And while many rappers faded after a single viral hit, LA was only getting better. His rhymes were getting tighter, his videos more professional, the streets and the internet were watching. Behind the scenes, he was spending more time with Lil Durk, who had already signed with Def Jam Records and was bringing his OTF crew with him. Durk saw potential in LA, not just as a rapper, but as a brand. There were whispers that L'A Capone could be the next to blow. He wasn't just street certified, he was musically gifted. And if he stayed focused, he could make it out. But making it out is easier said than done in Chicago. The same things that gave L'A Capone credibility, his gang affiliations, his authenticity, his willingness to name names in songs, were also the things that made him a target. In the drill scene, enemies aren't fictional. Rival gangs weren't just abstract ideas. They were people who had lost friends too. And when one rapper dissed another's fallen comrade, the response didn't come in a diss track. It came in bullets. Still, L'A Capone kept recording. He was working on his first full-length mixtape, tentatively titled King La. He was experimenting with hooks, improving his flow, and branching out with collaborators. His name was appearing on more and more blogs, and fans were calling for a full project. There was energy around him, the kind of momentum that can't be bought or manufactured in the streets. He was viewed as both an artist and a soldier. To some, he was the hope of 600 proof that someone from their set could make it. To others, he was a threat that needed to be silenced. And in a city like Chicago, where drill music wasn't just entertainment but an extension of warfare, that kind of notoriety came with a heavy price. Still, L'A Capone smiled in interviews. He posed for pictures, posted on Instagram, and freestyled. In studios like he had forever to live, he had months, and the clock was ticking louder than anyone knew. Asterisk. Section 3, OTF, 600. And the streets that raised him as L'A Capone's music career gained momentum. So too did his visibility, not just as a rapper, but as a representative of a neighborhood, a block, and a set.
Ow.
In Chicago, success doesn't exist in isolation. It's collective, tied to the people you grew up with, the crew you claim, and the neighborhood that shaped your world. For Leonard Anderson, yes. That neighborhood was the South Side. That crew was 600, and that movement was OTF, only the family, or OTF. Was the collective built by Lil Durk? A tight-knit circle of rappers and street figures from Chicago's Black Disciples BD affiliation. OTF wasn't just a rap label. It was a brotherhood, a street alliance. It represented loyalty, survival, and a mission to put their people on. L'A Capone wasn't just part of it. He was becoming one of its strongest voices. His relationship with Lil Durk ran deep. They weren't just label mates. They were like family. Durk recognized early that La had star power. In a genre full of repetitive flows and copycat lyrics, La's pen stood out. His lines were precise, laced with double meanings, and always delivered with chilling conviction. When La rapped, you listened, but Durk also knew something else. That drill rap in Chicago came with real-life consequences. Everyone affiliated with OTF had enemies. And those enemies weren't just online. They lived just a few blocks away. In a city where one wrong tweet, one look, one lyric could get you killed. Being visible meant being vulnerable. L'A Capone was affiliated with Team 600, a set of the Black Disciples based in Englewood, one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in America. The members of 600 weren't just rappers, they were soldiers. Guys like Rondo Numanin, Sede Tay 600, and Adai weren't studio gangsters. They were in the streets, living what they rapped. That authenticity was part of what made the 600 and OTF collectives so respected in the drill scene. Their stories weren't exaggerated, they were real. When L'A Capone rapped about shootouts, about dead ops, about making your block wet, it wasn't metaphor, it was reality, coded into song. But with that reality came war. Chicago's gang ecosystem, the Black Disciples had long-standing beef with the gangster Disciples, GD. L'A Capone's set. He had violent conflicts with G-Day-affiliated sets like STL, EBT, 051, Young Money, and Yarrow City. These weren't isolated incidents, they were ongoing battles. With decades of blood behind them, and in drill music, those feuds got amplified. L'A was known for his surgical disses, lines so specific they left no doubt who the target was. In tracks like Play for Keeps and Shooters, he name-dropped dead rivals, mocked their fates, and promised retaliation. One of the most infamous lines, Sean Dale, how the hot shit feel, was a direct reference to Sean Dale. Tuka Gregory, a murdered GD member. In drill culture, such a line isn't just provocative, it's a declaration of war. These lyrical shots weren't without consequence. In Chicago, the line between music and murder was almost non-existent. You could diss the wrong person and get killed within days. And yet to L'A, it wasn't posturing, it was personal. Many of his close friends had been killed, some in front of him, others while he was in the studio or at home. Each death left a scar. Each diss was a kind of response, a way of saying we haven't forgotten. His music became both armor and weapon, a shield from grief, a sword against his enemies. But even among the chaos, L'A Capone had ambitions bigger than his block. In interviews, though rare, he hinted that he didn't want to be stuck in this forever. He wanted to make music. Full-time, he wanted to tour, record, build something. He even mentioned wanting to help his mom get out of the neighborhood. He was, in many ways, a contradiction, a fierce soldier with the soul of a writer. Those who knew him personally often said he was different off-camera. Around his mother and siblings, he was quiet, polite, even goofy. He cracked jokes. He helped his mom with groceries. He wasn't flashy. He didn't wear oversized chains or brag about money. The street persona he projected in music was real. But it wasn't all of him. Yet in the streets, perception is everything. And L'A Capone was perceived as a top target, a star from the BD side who had disrespected too many rivals, gained too much attention, and threatened to rise above. It all, in the logic of the streets, letting him win was too dangerous. His success would only empower his set. His words would recruit more soldiers. His rise had to be stopped. There were close calls, rumors of shootouts, suspicious encounters. Knew the risk. He moved carefully. He was cautious about his location, his movements, even his studio sessions. Still, Chicago is a city where one small misstep can lead to your last breath. And in 2013, the city was on fire, averaging over 500 homicides that year. Many of them teenagers, many of them tied to the very same war L'A was caught in. He wasn't blind to it, in fact. Some say he felt it coming. He started writing faster, recording more, staying up late in studios, trying to finish new material. It was like he knew his time was limited. Friends later recalled that in the weeks before his death, he was more focused than ever, not on the streets, but on the music. He wanted to finish King L'A, his debut mixtape. He wanted to put something permanent into the world. But permanence doesn't always come the way you plan. On the internet, L'A Capone was trending. His name was in blog headlines. His videos were climbing. His reputation was rising. But on the streets, he was a marked man. Every success made him more of a threat. Every lyric made him more of a target. And so, while he kept pushing forward into the booth, into the spotlight, into the future, something dark followed behind him, waiting, watching, and getting closer every day. Asterisk. Section 4. The final day. A promise cut short. September 26, 2013 began like any other day on the south side of Chicago. The summer air was giving way to early folklore, quieter, but the city still pulsed with its usual tension. For Leonard Anderson, known to most now as L'A Capone, it was supposed to be a regular day in the studio. He had plans, beats to write too. Verses to lay down. Another piece of the puzzle to add to what he was building his future. He had turned 17 just 8 days earlier, a birthday that came with few celebrations and even fewer illusions. Leonard didn't believe in long-term planning anymore, but he believed in progress. He was working harder than ever, recording constantly, trying to stay off the streets long enough to turn his story into something that could save him, or at least save his name that afternoon. L'A headed to a small recording studio located on Stony Island Avenue, a quiet block not far from where he lived. He'd been there before. The studio was known among drill rappers as a reliable, low-key spot to record quickly and without much attention. The booth was simple, the equipment was basic. But to L'A, it didn't matter. He made magic anywhere he touched a mic. Inside the studio, he spent hours working on new music. Some say he was finalizing material for his anticipated debut mixtape, King L'A. Others remember him laying verses for collaborative tracks with Rondo Number 9 or Lil Durk. Whatever he was recording, he was energized, confident. He posted on social media during the session a few jokes, a few song previews. Nothing out of the ordinary. But outside, things weren't ordinary at all. Unknown to L'A, someone had been tracking him, watching from the shadows. In Chicago's drill scene, studios were often ambush points. Rivals knew where rappers recorded. Alleyways and exits became fatal traps. For those caught slipping, there were no second chances. As the sun dipped behind the skyline, lapped up his session. Around 6:30 p.m., he walked out of the back door of the studio and into a narrow alley that ran behind the building. It was a routine exit, one he and others had taken dozens of times. But this time, someone was waiting. Multiple gunshots rang out, echoing off the brick walls of the alley. Witnesses later said the shooters emerged from between parked cars, firing fast and with precision. L'A Capone was hit 3 times. Once in the right thigh, once in the lower back, and a third shot grazed his upper body. He collapsed in the alley, blood pooling beneath him. Inside the studio, someone heard the shots and ran outside. They found L'A lying on the ground, still conscious but fading fast. His eyes were open. He was breathing, shallowly, trying to say something. Someone called 911. Paramedics arrived within minutes and rushed him to Northwestern Memorial Hospital, one of the best trauma centers in the city, but the bullets had done their work. Despite doctors' efforts to stabilize him, L'A Capone was pronounced dead at 8:30 p.m. The news spread like wildfire. Within an hour, Twitter and Instagram were flooded with shock, sadness, and fury. Lil Durk tweeted, "Rip Lil Bro," and then went silent. Rondo Number 9, visibly heartbroken, posted a series of angry, cryptic messages that made it clear this death wasn't going to be left unanswered. At home, his mother, Deidre Morris, received the kind of call no parent ever wants. She rushed to the hospital only to be met with the cold, fluorescent silence of an emergency room that could not bring her son back. In her kitchen, the remains of L.A.'s 17th birthday still lingered: a half-empty cake box, folded gift bag, a pair of new sneakers he hadn't worn yet. L'A Capone's funeral was held the following week. His casket, glossy and dark, was surrounded by photographs of him as a child playing basketball, grinning beside family, rapping into a phone. The service was packed. Hundreds came, some from OTF, some from 600, some from his school, some from the music world, many from the streets. There were tears, silence, prayers, and rage. Some people couldn't even look at the casket. Others stared at it like they were waiting for it to move, to prove this was all a mistake. Outside the church, the atmosphere was tense. Police lined the block, aware that funerals in Chicago often turned into crime scenes. Inside, people whispered about revenge, about justice, about what would happen next. Because in drill culture, a death is rarely the end of the story. In the days that followed, social media turned into a battlefield. Fans posted tribute videos, spinning his most popular lyrics into memorials. Posing sets mocked his death online, deepening the cycle of hate and retaliation. On YouTube, L'A's views skyrocketed. Every lyric he ever wrote now carried new weight, new meaning. His disses became eerie echoes. His threats, ghostly promises. Songs like "Play for Keeps" and "So Loud" no longer sounded like boasts, they sounded like prophecies. Then came the arrests. After months of investigation, Chicago police charged 3 individuals in connection with L'A Capone's murder. Michael Mays, Mako Buchanan, and Saki Hardy Johnson. All three were linked to 051 Young Money, a known rival set. The shooting, authorities said, was planned, premeditated, retaliation for past events, and part of an ongoing war that had taken the lives of dozens before Hemand would take dozens more after. In 2017, the case went to trial. Each of the three defendants was convicted. Michael Mays received 24 years. Mako Buchanan was sentenced to 45 years. Hardy Johnson was handed 60 years. But for LA's family, there was no sense of relief, no closure. In a world where so many murders go unsolved, justice felt both overdue and incomplete. It didn't bring Leonard back. It didn't reverse time. It didn't erase the sound of those gunshots or the weight of that final night. It did do was close a chapter. Not the story, but a chapter. Because L'A Capone's story didn't end in that alley. It only transformed.